Hi, this is Sean from Ace Appliance in Toledo, Ohio. Welcome back to another in-home diagnostic video brought to you by ApplianceVideo.com.
Last time we were here to diagnose the bad compressor, so we're here to replace it. So I got to access it and remove the back panel here, so that's what I'm going to do now, remove the 1/4-inch screws. Okay, these are the tools you'll need to replace the compressor. I have my gauges, I use a flashlight, needle nose pliers, flathead screwdriver, I use channel locks, a drill with a 1/4-inch bit on it, small crescent wrench, adjustable pliers. I had a bucket with water and a rag for cooling down, my reclaimer, my refrigerant scale, refrigerant, my torches with all my brazing supplies, the striker, flux, the brazing rod, oxygen, acetylene, sandpaper. Inlet valve here. So our compressor is located over here. Okay, so we got the back panel out of the way. I just disconnected the inlet valve. So now I'm going to go ahead and proceed. I got to get the wiring off of the compressor. Alright, so we got that off. I'm just going to move that to the side. Now we have our brackets. There's one here, one here. Got a little tab on the top. We just twist, so that way we can then slide the bracket up. The bracket will then pivot to the side, and it will come up and off, which we did here. We'll do the same thing to the other side. The reason I do this first is because when we braze or unbraze our compressor, it gets very hot. It's easier to do this when it's cold. We got our mounting brackets off. Now what I have to do is over here on our process stub here, I got to install a tap. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my sandpaper here and I'm going to just clean up this a little bit. You don't have to worry too much about this because it's a newer unit, so the connections are pretty clean still. Alright, so we got that. Alright, now that I have it cleaned up, I'm just going to put some flux on there. Alright, so we got some flux on there. Now I'm going to take my tap valve, open it up. I just have the this piece here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it on my where I have my flux. I'm going to then close this up on the back side, so that way hopefully it stays in position for me. And this is what we're going to be able to tap into the sealed system with. So we just have it in position there like that. Now I'm going to get my gauges out, or not my gauges, my torches out, and I'm going to brace that in position. I got my tap on there right now. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to put I have a bucket that I put water in, and I have a rag in there, and I'm going to help to cool down this joint. Alright, I'm going to touch this up. I can already see a spot on there. I kind of burned through on my tap a little bit, at least I perceive I did. Yeah, so I'm going to go through and touch it up. I had my torches a little too hot. my tap, it burned on there a little bit, so just gonna cover that up. Alright, so we'll heat this up again. Alright, now we're gonna cool it down again like I did the first time. Flashlight. The unit's still probably pretty warm, but I just know not to touch it, and all I'm going to do is just visually inspect. I can see the hole that I first saw is completely covered, so that's good. I'm going to check the backside with my inspection mirror. See how that looks. So as far as I can tell, everything appears to be sealed up just fine. Before we pierce it, what we're going to do is hook our gauges up to it, hook it up to my reclaimer and pull it into a vacuum and see if it holds. And that's going to be the way that we're really going to check and make sure that it's not leaking anywhere. Alright, so now we're going to hook our gauges up to our access point here that we just installed. Alright, then with that on there, I'm going to go ahead, it's already hooked up to my reclaimer. I have my gauges here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just open them up. And I'm going to turn my reclaimer on. See the needle goes down into a vacuum here. I'm going to leave it on just for a few seconds. I'm going to close it up, and I want to make sure it holds the vacuum. So we're reading almost 30-pound vacuum. Go ahead and close up my gauges. Turn off my reclaimer. And then basically I'm just going to leave this here for a minute or two just to make sure it holds. Basically I pulled the vacuum in this tiny little area here, and if you consider the hose as well, and we just want to make sure there's no leak anywhere. Okay, as we can see, our pressure level hasn't changed, it's staying the same, so we know that there's no leak there. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my gauges from here. Install the rest of the tap so that way we can pierce the system and then remove the refrigerant. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and remove it. What we did there, set that to the side. Get the rest of our pieces of our tap, which there are 3 pieces. So our seal, if you look at the bag, it has instructions, but this little seal slides on top of our, or down on the piercing component here. That's going to slide inside of our tap like that, and then we're going to screw it down to tighten it and get it in position. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put our piercing component in there, put our top on, our cap, and going to start tightening it down, and as we tighten it down, that's going to pierce our system. And I'm going to use a second wrench here just to hold, to give support to the part that I just brazed down. And you're just going to tighten it down as far as you can until it stops. You don't want to go crazy because it is copper. Copper is not very strong. And although your goal is to remove refrigerant, you don't want to eat refrigerant. Alright, so we're on there as tight as I can. Now I'm going to go ahead and remove this and this cap. The system should be pierced at this point. So we got the cap off. We'll set this to the side. So now I'm going to hook my gauges back up here, and when I do that, we should see the needle go into the blue area because there is pressure in there. You can see it went up. It's reading about 35 pounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my reclaimer on, open up my unit and let it run, let it pull down into a vacuum, and that way we remove all of our refrigerant. So that's what we're going to do now. we pulled the unit down in the vacuum, which should mean that we removed almost all the refrigerant. So we're going to go ahead and take off our gauges here. We're done with this for the moment. We'll set this to the side. And now I'm going to use my Schrader valve tool, remove the Schrader valve, because when we heat this up, we would damage the seals. So I have my Schrader valve tool. Insert that in here, and it just unscrews. And we may hear a little bit of hissing right there, just any kind of residual refrigerant that maybe I couldn't get to, or it's in the system. So I'm going to set that to the side so we don't lose it. Now we have our seals out of there. Now what we can do is unbraze our fittings. So there are 3 of them. We have one here, and one here. I'll just start with the one on the left and work my way around. And all I'm going to do is use my torches, and in a reverse fashion, try to get these wires out of the way as best I can. In a reverse fashion, we're just going to braze, we'll say. We'll heat it up, gently pull on it as we're heating it up, and then pull it apart as we get that, say, the binding agent soft. One down. You still good? Okay. Now that we have those, I'm going to, just like I did last time I brazed, I'm going to use my wet rag and cool down, so that way I can handle everything and I can remove the compressor. And we'll just set it there for a few seconds to help bring that temperature down, and then move it to the other fittings. Okay, so I'm going to remove our compressor. It's going to lift straight up off these posts down here. And when I bring it out, I want to make sure I don't accidentally catch one of my copper lines here. So we're coming up and kind of straight out here. So now we have our open cavity here where the new compressor is going to go in. Alright, so that's there. Now, while I have this open, it's a little bit easier to get to my lines. I'm going to try to clean them up the best I can, and with my sandpaper. So I'm just going to start sanding them down. And I'm going to do this for all 3 of my connections that I had here. Alright, so we're going to add our new compressor. I have to put our rubber mounting feet in, and there are 4 of them, and will just kind of twist into place. Just like that there. Next is they put these little rubber guys in here so nothing gets inside of our compressor. Oil doesn't leak out in shipping. So we need to remove those. That's where our lines are going to go, get brazed into. Alright, so now we're going to put our compressor in. Set it onto our little mounting feet. Just like that. And like I did before, I'm going to mount it before I braze, so it's easier to do. I'm not going to do my electrical, just because if the wires get hot, that could be a problem. They'd be too close for me. So I'm going to take my brackets, put them onto my compressor. When I get it in position, I got to just twist the locking, say, arm. And that just holds it in place. And do the same thing for this side. Lock it. Alright, so now the compressor's in place. Now I'm going to do a dry fit of all my lines. Just going to insert them. Make sure they want to go in like there. So that's good. This one here. See how if that one wants to go in at all for me. See how far that barely went in. Alright, I'm going to try to clean this one up a little bit here because it doesn't want to cooperate very well. Alright, so that goes in there pretty well for me. That's good. So 2 or 3. So I'm going to clean this one up here, work on this one a little bit, and then make sure I can get it into my compressor. So I got all my 3 fittings to fit in there. So now I'm going to put my flux on all my lines here that I'm going to be brazing, and then go ahead and insert it into the compressor, like so. Do this one here first. And I'm actually going to do this one here last, just to give me a little bit easier access to that port. So I'll do my process stub last. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up my torches again and start brazing. Alright, and then we still have our last fitting to do, so I'm going to prepare that with our flux. Go ahead and get that in position. Okay, so now we're going to check with my inspection mirror and a flashlight and just look at our braze spots here and see if everything looks okay, just like we did last time. We've already cooled everything with our rag, so some of these are kind of tough to get into and see, but
that's a good question. You have to wait for the...
everything looks good from what I can see. Alright, so it passes the visual inspection. That doesn't mean that it's actually good. Now what we're going to do is, since everything's cooled down, I'm going to go ahead and put my Schrader valve that I took out. And that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to go ahead and insert that into our tap. And I'm going to screw that into place with our... So we're getting that into position. And then after we get this in, we're going to go ahead and hook up our gauges with our, I'm going to use my reclaimer still, just because I didn't bring my vacuum pump in. And we're going to pull it into a vacuum, let it run for a few minutes, see if it holds, and if as long as it holds, then we're done. We can start cleaning up. We just have to put the refrigerant in and then put everything back together. So I'm going to go ahead and put my gauges back on. Go ahead and open my gauges, turn on my reclaimer, pull it down into a vacuum. I'm going to let it get down into a, close to the 30-pound vacuum. And then, so right now we're just shy of 30. I'm just for me, I shut it off and I see if that needle bounces. Okay, it holds pretty well, so I know I don't have a big leak that I missed. So I'm going to go ahead and open it back up and let it continue to run. What it's doing while it pulls into the vacuum, it actually raises the temperature, and any moisture that would be in the system is going to turn it into a vapor and remove that. So we're going to let this run while we clean up our other components, and then we'll come back in and verify that we don't have a leak. We pull it down into a vacuum and we can see here that it's holding the vacuum, so we know we don't have any leaks. So at this point here, I'm going to go ahead and hook up the electrical components on the compressor. I'm going to leave my line attached because I have to put the refrigerant into it. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go ahead and hook up my electrical components. Alright, this particular unit, the compressor, came with a new overload relay and capacitor. Okay. Alright, so we have our overload relay capacitor. We're going to just plug it in and then mount it onto our compressor. Our ground wire we had taken off earlier, we're going to go ahead and put that on. And then there's a mounting bracket that came off when we did everything, so we're going to go ahead and pop that back on. Just like that. And so our electrical components are hooked up. Our unit is now ready to add refrigerant. So I'm going to get my scale on my refrigerant, hook my gauges up to the refrigerant tank, and put in the specified amount of refrigerant. Once it zeroes out, I'm going to go ahead and put my tank on there. So we're at 0 right now. Set my tank on here. And our weight goes up. Now I'm going to take my my gauges and I'm going to hook it up to my tank. So I'm going to push these on my tank. My gauges are still closed, so that way no refrigerant is going to get past there. So I'm going to have to open up my tank. So that's open. I'm going to purge any air out of my line that's hooked up here. So that's good. And then I'm going to give this a second just to make sure it stabilizes where it needs to be. As you can see, it already just moved a little bit. Alright, it appears to be pretty much stabilized at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and zero it out. So it's at 0. I'm going to open up my gauges, and we're going to put the proper amount of refrigerant into the system. So there's a ½ ounce. 1 ounce. Okay, so it's slowing down with how it's taking the refrigerant on its own. So to speed up the process, I'm going to go ahead and plug the refrigerator in. And by doing so, the compressor will turn on and it'll start sucking the refrigerant a little bit faster. Okay, so we now have the specified amount of refrigerant in the unit, so I can disconnect all my gauges and everything at this point. I'm going to shut my tank off first, and then disconnect, and then disconnect from my refrigerator. It's just like when you take a bike tire off, when you pump off your bike tire, even though you're, go as fast as you can, a little bit of that air is going to come out. So nothing you can do to prevent that. So there's nothing to be alarmed about. Now at this point here, we'll go ahead and put our cap on our inlet access point on the compressor, and then put the back panel on and hook up our water valve that we had disconnected to get that back panel out of the way. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put my cap back on, and I just want to snug it down. I don't need to over tighten. I am going to brace this just to make sure that I don't damage it by pulling too hard on it. So that's on there now. Now we're going to go ahead and put our little back panel back on. As I said, I'm going to have to reconnect our inlet valve, which I disconnected to give us a better view. Okay, and that'll complete our repair.
Thank you for watching another quality in-home diagnostic video brought to you by ApplianceVideo.com.